Welcome to What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up Wednesday. I'm really excited to have Dustin with us today. He's a server at Dark Table, and he's here to tell us about his job. Welcome, Dustin.
Oh, thanks.
Can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, I'm a server at Dark Table. I've been there quite a while, since about 2012. I was actually one of the original servers there. So, yeah, I have no vision. My sort of vision history is I had glaucoma when I was pretty young, very young, about 6 months old. And so I had a little bit of vision up until I was about 10 years old, so enough to see like colors and enough to not run into things, which is what I like to tell people, but never enough to see like a lot of detail. So I learned Braille when I was really young and how to use a cane and stuff. So, and then since, like I said, since I was maybe 10 or 11, I've had no vision at all. I'm a former now Paralympic athlete. So I was in track and field. I was a 400-meter runner.
Awesome.
Up until about 2016, I think was my last year. Yeah, so.
So can you describe your job as a server at Dark Table? What's like an average shift like?
So an average shift, so Dark Table is obviously, well, not obviously, but it is a dine in the dark restaurant. It's pitch black. People are usually pretty shocked at how actually dark it is in there. It's dinner only, so we're open from about 5:30 until 11 at night, and we do 2 sittings. So we'll do we're usually around 60 people in a sitting. So we bring people in pretty much all at the not all at the same time, but all around the same time frame, and we do it twice. So we'll do like 5:30 to 7:30 roughly, and then 8 or so until 10 or 10:30. It's a regular restaurant. We do a 3-course meal usually. So it's like a regular kind of serving in a restaurant job plus this whole big responsibility of kind of making sure that everything goes smoothly because it's pitch black. So we'll start. We'll have people show up outside, and they order outside, and then when they've ordered, we as servers go out and get our table. And we'll bring them in. We have kind of just like an entryway that is dark, and we'll kind of explain to them kind of the basics of how we like to do things, and it gives them a chance to adjust. So, and then we'll lead them to their tables and kind of get them settled, and yeah, and we just kind of from that point on, it's just sort of like what you would expect as a regular serving kind of gig, with the kind of added challenge of sort of navigating with other servers on the floor. So we usually have, on a busy night, we'll have 5 servers. For 60 people, I think you would normally have maybe one more server, but we find that it is easier to have like fewer servers on the floor and do more work, but also have less risk of kind of having an issue with running into people and stuff. So. Yeah.
Does that happen? Do people collide while carrying plates of food?
Pretty rarely, and not so much when you're carrying things, because you're obviously more cautious when you have things in your hands. It does happen occasionally when when you're rushing or whatever, if you don't have anything in your hands. But we're pretty good about that kind of thing. We do our best to keep each night is the same staff. It doesn't always work out, but it's helpful to kind of really get to know kind of your coworkers and how they like to kind of operate. And you really notice, like in the summers, people will take time off, and in the summer you kind of get more of a oh, here's who's working tonight. Maybe you've met them, maybe you haven't. And it really shows how much more challenging that can be. So knowing your coworkers certainly helps for sure.
Interesting. Is there like markings on the floor? Because you're not using your white cane while you're bringing plates of food to people.
We have, so more or less the restaurant is set up in a grid, so there aren't like kind of just random tables everywhere. Um, it's kind of a grid, so that if um, you have a lot of just like straight lines that you can walk, and then you're making like a direct right turn or a direct left turn. We do put a little bit of like strips of carpet through the aisles to kind of keep on a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
Some people use them more than others. It's for me, it's one of those things where I don't think I use them, but I think if they were not there, I would really realize that I'm using them more than I think. So they're kind of
Right.
become intuitive for you. But for the most part, it's just communication, verbal communication. We're always kind of um, we try to talk as much as we can as we're walking, and you're listening for the other servers maybe talking to their tables or
Mm-hmm.
things. So it's mostly just like a verbal kind of communication and that kind of thing. So, and we definitely try that. One of the things that's different is for those of you guys that tend to go to restaurants quite a bit, you'll notice that like maybe 3 or 4 people will visit the table at like bringing food and stuff. It's not always your one server, but at Dark Table, we do try to make sure that it's always the same server going to the table. For 2 reasons, we find that the first and kind of most important reason is that it makes it so that once you're in your section, you don't have to worry about is there another server there, right? But it also is a lot more. It's grounding for the people that are there that you're serving. They don't have this added like,
Who are you? Who's
yeah,
talking to me now?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we've had situations where like a server will be 10-15 minutes late, and they'll call and say, hey, can so and so take my first tables or whatever, and so they'll get them seated, and then you're going and introducing yourself to them in the dark already. And you can always tell that there's not that sort of connection that you get with people when you meet them outside.
Oh, interesting. So if
Yeah,
they don't know what you look like, that's an
yeah,
issue for them.
very much. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Wow.
It's always much more of just a kind of just like a basic interaction instead of like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Hmm. Interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So what attracted you to this job?
I don't. I didn't set out to be a server. Found this job posting. Um, And at that time, they were about 2 months from opening, and so I got my resume together because I was at that time, still full-time training. It was actually so I competed in the London Paralympics, and this was the summer leading up to that. So I wasn't looking for full-time work at all. I was looking for kind of a flexible position. So when I saw kind of like restaurant server, which is what a lot of the sighted athletes that I was training with were doing, I was like, that sounds perfect. I'll be able to, have some flexibility. And that was, it was actually, it was funny because I never thought I would be in public kind of customer service. Um, not, not so much because I couldn't see, but I just wasn't that kind of personality. So it was definitely not something I was looking for, but got in there and kind of found it to be a fun kind of gig, so kind of stuck with it.
So do you need any kind of schooling to be a server?
Fortunately not. It's actually a really good job to do if you're in school. So but you don't really need school for it. You need some skills in being able to kind of deal with deal with a situation when it kind of comes up quickly and that kind of thing. You have to be able to sort of think on your feet, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly we all get better at as kind of we do the job more and more, but I would say that's kind of the most important sort of skill to have.
What sort of training did they give you when you started? What does that look like?
For me, like I said, I had more of an opportunity to train because the restaurant was 2 months from opening when I kind of started. So I had a lot of time, and there was, I think, 7 or 8 of us that started. And so we were sort of almost designing the sort of system that we wanted to use.
Mm.
So for me, the training was different in that it was figuring things out on the fly. Right now, the training would sort of be, people will usually kind of just come in and sit in on a shift for maybe like half a shift. They'll kind of just sit in the restaurant and kind of listen to kind of what goes on. You can, usually hear a lot of how the servers are doing things, and we usually try to pair up someone that we're training with one particular server, and they will kind of go through, kind of the layout of the restaurant and kind of what all of the different kind of ways that we do things are. And then we kind of just ease people into it. We'll, start them off with 1 or 2 tables. We'll just kind of see how it goes from there. It's kind of interesting in that, like, our sections are very different. I personally work a section that is sort of 6 or 7 tables of 2 or 3 people. But we have sections that are like, you might be serving like 2 tables of 8 or something, right? So you're usually serving between 12 and 16 people, but how they're divided up differs. And so when you're training, you have to we have to be able to see kind of like, what are you best at? Where in the restaurant would you be, best to use, right? So we try to move people around a bit as well when they get kind of comfortable with the job, and let them kind of explore what works best for them, where they're the most comfortable. So
Cool.
Yeah. We do, we do our best to train people, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to jump in there and kind of figure it out. And if you're way off base, we'll let you know, kind of. But there's certainly room for figuring things out on your own too. So
Okay. Are there personality traits or special skills you feel are important for this position?
I mean, I think classically you would say you have to be, fairly extroverted and, willing to talk to people and things like that. That's not how I would have described myself at the beginning. I think those things come in time, as you kind of go through it. So just really just like a willingness to learn. All restaurants can be, they're pretty unforgiving. So if you're new there and you're not doing something the right way, no one's gonna. Sometimes people aren't the most gentle when they have feedback for you, and so you have to be a little bit thick-skinned in that way. But that's all restaurants, and probably, to be honest, a lot of non-restaurant jobs as well. So,
what do you like most about your job?
I like talking with the people that come in. Sometimes you'll get tables that just kind of want to keep to themselves and eat and whatever, which is totally fine. But every once in a while, you'll get a table that is like interested in the place and in the people there and sort of people's background and that kind of thing. So I do like kind of talking with people about those things. It's definitely one of those places where you literally have no idea what you're going to get on any given night. So I kind of like it doesn't get boring, right? And that's that can be a good and a bad thing, because sometimes you go in and you just want a night of stability and predictability. But for the most part, I like how interesting a shift is, and that what I try to make sure is that people don't leave with this sort of sense that, oh my goodness, like I could never be a blind person. This is so hard. What I like to do is make sure that people always realize at the end of a sitting that they figured out a little strategy to solve a problem, right? Maybe they're not like experts at it, but like, oh, if I always put my glass of wine in one spot, then I'll know where it is, right? Like, it sounds silly, but like, well, people need that ability to kind of realize that if you live this life, you would kind of figure it out, right? And so I like to be able to kind of show people that, and make them able to see kind of how we do things, right? So
Yeah, I was curious if you find that you do a lot of sort of blindness educating in that job.
um, again, I do. I try to be sensitive to kind of what each or what I think that a table would want. Because like I said, some of them are just like bring the food and go away, and they want to figure it out.
Mm,
And some of them have tons of questions and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm pretty good at like balancing the being helpful without telling them how to do things
hmm.
kind of way of, of that.
How cool to be in that position for a change. Because in normal life, people are always trying to be helpful, right?
Yeah. No, it definitely flips the kind of power dynamic for sure, which has been really good for me as somebody who kind of, I guess I don't want to say like I don't think people would think that I'm shy, but it just kind of, never had that experience of kind of being like the expert in the room. So that's kind of cool to
Hmm.
be able to, here's the thing that I can do that you guys can't, and people look up to for that kind of thing, right?
Totally.
It's really cool. So
Yeah. What do you like least about your job?
um I think the things that I like least are just the things that are pretty much across the board going to be the things that are negative in the restaurant industry. Restaurants can be pretty high turnover places. You get a lot of new people coming in, servers or bartenders or whatever leave fairly frequently. So it can be challenging from that perspective to frankly to get along with everybody, right, and to kind of
Mm,
manage all of these relationships. We're fortunate in that we split our tips, so no one is actually working for their tips, but it can be like competitive in terms of trying to get things out of the kitchen and kind of get your things dealt with when you need them, or so it can be a little bit of a challenge in that way. Like I said, any restaurant can be a challenge for sure. So it's one of those things where as I said, I like the aspect of never knowing what you're going to get, but you also never know what you're going to get. And man, sometimes you go outside and the people that are there waiting for you are just really challenging to deal with, and
right.
you have to deal with them, right? Like it's
Hmm.
do it. So
What kind of salary can somebody expect to make as a server?
so generally serving is minimum wage plus tips. So um, for dark table, I can say it averages out to be about 23 or 24 an hour.
Okay.
Um, and then it just depends on how many nights you can work and how many nights you want to work. Usually people work 3 to 4 nights a week at the restaurant. But it's also seasonal too, right? Like we go through just like any restaurants, like there's kind of a common thing where it's like the Christmas rush, and then it's totally dead in January, and then up to Valentine's Day, and then Valentine's Day it really picks up. So at that time you might be averaging less than 20 an hour, just because there's just not as many people coming through, or you might be, it's totally a thing to get a call at 2 or 3 hours ahead of your shift, and they'll say, oh, don't have the people for you today, so why don't you take the night off, and we'll try to find another shift for you at some point. But yeah, so realistically it's kind of in that 25 an hour range when it's busy, which it usually is. Usually we're usually pretty full 8 or 9 months a year kind of thing.
Mm,
But it can be unpredictable, right? So it's one of those ones where you kind of never know what you're going to make in a 2 week period. You can kind of guess, but it's
hmm.
it's not like having a salary position or something. So
Is
yeah.
there any, like, the longer you're there, do you advance to be like a manager, or like, is there an opportunity to make more if you've been there a long time?
Um, Unfortunately, not at Dark Table as yet. One of the issues we have is only the servers that are visually impaired. So whereas normally you would move up into like a bar manager sort of role, those are kind of right now they're cited positions.
Mm.
Um,
Seems like a funny question, but have there been any vision related challenges in doing this job?
um, I'm sure there have been that I'm not thinking of. But the one thing I will say is I, I I have no vision, so it's not such a problem. People who we do have some servers that are that have a fair amount of light perception or more, right? So they would be
Mm-hmm.
definitely legally blind, but able to navigate sort of visually on a bright sunny day, and they kind of struggle with they're able to do it, but they might be a little slower. Um, Certainly, what I notice with them is so in between the two sittings, we try to keep about 10 or 15 minutes free to turn the lights on and do a quick cleanup. Usually,
Mm,
we're able to, and the people who have sight or have some sight really take advantage of that time to like clean up their tables, whereas I would already have my kind of tables reset because it's just easier for them to kind of,
right.
I mean, that's not to say that they all do a great job when the lights are off for sure, and if we don't have time to put the lights on, they make it work. But I know they're more comfortable. um, it's more of an adjustment, whereas I wouldn't even be able to tell you if the lights were on or not. So
Right.
um, that can be a challenge. There are every once in a while you might run into a situation where you have to deal with people outside on the patio, and it's kind of like you're back into that world of these people can see and I can't. So that can be a little bit challenging too. But for the most part, it's kind of a job designed to be done for us. So
Mm-hmm.
it works out pretty well.
I imagine you need to be pretty good at mobility, like just sort of your orientation of where you are. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. Having a good sort of spatial awareness um, is really key. I will say that's definitely one of the things that I've noticed does get better with time, because we've had, a few servers that have started and you're kind of like, I'm not sure if this is going to work out for this person, and they almost always figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
and they do kind of get better at that. But it isn't a job where you can constantly be touching things, right? What you'll notice is like people will rest their hands on the edge of some of their tables, so you can't be reaching out to touch tables to use them as landmarks, right? You would have
Right.
to be hands off and using the landmarks on the floor for sure, but sometimes that's not even enough, and so you have to be able to, for instance, like we try to make it obvious when people sit down where at the table they should be sitting, so that they're not like out in the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
But people are crazy and they do crazy things, and you have to be really mindful of like, oh, my colleague just sat a new table there. I probably need to be a little bit mindful when I go through there the first couple times to make sure that they aren't, sitting in an odd place, or they didn't just come from the airport and they have a suitcase beside their table or something like that, right? So really,
Yeah,
really
right.
being aware of the situation, and that is super helpful. So
Cool. What do you feel you've gained or learned by working at Darktable?
tons. It's really made me more social, more able to just be more sort of like social with people that you might not have a lot in common with, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that might not be an issue for some people, but for me, it always kind of was. So I feel like I'm better at finding common ground with people and that kind of thing. Certainly, it's taught me a lot about just kind of working in a team dynamic, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, right? You have to be able to sort things out on the fly sometimes. And I think I'm certainly much better at it than I was when I started there, so that helps. And sometimes you have to just kind of just manage your time, right? So it taught me a ton about managing my time, and you know, when I talk about difficult tables, it's like you have to realize that you can't spend all your time satisfying one difficult table when you have five others that are, you know, not difficult. So you have to really set boundaries and that kind of thing, and really kind of manage a whole bunch of people at the end of the day, because they're all there, and they don't know what else is going on in the restaurant, but you do, and so you kind of have to be able to keep it all in your head, and make kind of the right decisions about what needs to happen at what time. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, lots of things to learn in the restaurant industry for sure.
What advice would you have for somebody with a visual impairment who's interested in pursuing this job?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's just one of us in Vancouver here, so we are always. I don't want to say we're always hiring, but we're frequently hiring. Um, so, I mean, to be honest, it's just getting a resume together, and getting in touch with the place. Like, that's, we always kind of think there's this big hoop to jump through for getting jobs and stuff, and sometimes there is, but sometimes it's just getting in touch, you know, just kind of cold calling and saying, hey, I'm interested, you know, here's my resume, if you're ever looking, let me know. And a lot of times that'll kind of happen. It would probably help to go to the restaurant and kind of, you know, go have a meal there and kind of see or listen to kind of what it's all about. Would definitely be my recommendations. And I'm not pitching, but there are, if anyone's interested, there are three other Dine in the Dark places in Canada. So there's one in Toronto, and there's one in Montreal, and there's also one in Calgary. The Vancouver and Calgary ones are owned by the same people, and the Toronto and Montreal ones used to be owned by those people, that they sold them and then moved out to Vancouver, and then they opened in Calgary a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago. So if you're, you know anyone that's not from BC, there might be opportunities for them as well. So.